I feel a sense of loss for the everyday activities that used to fill my days. I miss my friends and family in the flesh. I grieve the absence of hugs. Along with these thoughts is a tremendous gratitude for my personal situation. I'm safe, I'm warm, I'm fed, and I'm in touch with a lot of people. But I do struggle with the fear of the loss that might come. And I do grieve for the people out there who are not safe, not warm, not fed. I've always been a bit of a pessimist. I work to overcome the feeling that the other shoe is going to drop at any moment. I try to plan responsibly while pushing the dark thoughts of the worst case scenario to the back of my mind. It's possible I may lose someone dear. That just because I try to take all precautions and encourage the people in my life to do the same doesn't guarantee that I will be safe from loss. We have a daughter who is an ER nurse, and we have a grandson who is an EMT, and they are caring for COVID patients. What really helps me is to talk this all out with a trusted spiritual partner. If these fears stay inside, they just grow. I seem to have a magic magnifying mind all on my own. Having a loving witness and then being one for someone else seems to diminish the anticipatory grief and reminds me that right here, right now, I'm okay and my loved ones are okay. Plus, I try to stay busy in positive ways and have a structure to my days. If I can think about others and how I might be of help, then of course I do feel better. This is something none of us have ever experienced. Everyone I know is struggling. I take comfort in community, not being alone. And I pray to whatever is out there for strength, good humor, and a positive attitude. And I pray for all of you.
And how do you live? And what are your fears during this crisis? What questions to surface after midnight from across the world? In your country, is it the time of day to wrestle all the existential and daily dreads until, like Jacob and the vicious angel, they conceded to bless us? I am afraid that people I love will die. I'm afraid that my child is inheriting a world so much harsher than what she deserves. I'm afraid that desperate times call for desperate measures, and I'm not quite desperate enough. Should I go on? I'm afraid that people have wandered away from the very idea of truth. I'm afraid we have unlearned how to speak and how to listen. I'm afraid the fabric that holds us together is woven more loosely than I thought, and people keep slipping through. And how do you live? With grief, with fear, with laughter, with boredom, with glee, with contentment, with fury, with hope, with the firm conviction that no thing cancels out any other thing. Death does not cancel life. Grief does not cancel joy. Fear does not cancel conviction, nor any of those statements in reverse. Make your heart a bowl that is large enough to hold it all. Imagine that you are the potter. Stretch the clay. Cherish the turning wheel. Accept that the bowl is never going to be done. Today is Easter, a holiday that over 1 billion Christians celebrate every year. It is a holiday symbolized by the idea of good defeating evil, of life triumphing over death. It is a sacred time for Christians and a common theme and aspiration of the human experience that dates back millennia, appearing now and then in religious and cultural traditions that span the globe. I was not raised Christian, nor do I identify as a Christian. Yet I know many people, including non-Christians, many of you, who find this holiday to be a special time. For it comes each year as the flowers begin to bloom, as the earth begins to warm from the sun, as the world becomes a bit greener, more verdant, and filled with life. What a beautiful thing to be alive, and a beautiful time to celebrate life itself. But this year, this Easter, whether you are Christian or not, it sure feels like a bit of a stretch, for me at least, to preach about hope and life this morning. This year, for me at least, it feels like uncertainty and fear of what is to come of this global pandemic, that this is what hangs over us this morning. Anticipation is our theme for April, and I just have to be honest that I'm struggling with the anticipation of loss, of grief, of personal and collective grief as a community and as Hoosiers. As Hoosiers, as Americans, and as global citizens of this world. Indiana is projected to reach its peak of this global crisis later this week, and many states will be reaching its peak in the coming weeks as the slow yet still tragic loss of life will continue into the summer. This weighs on me, and I know it weighs on you. You wouldn't join a virtual gathering like this one unless you felt it was important to come together, especially in these times. So I'm struggling with what to bring to you on this Easter Sunday. I do believe that love will win in the end, that hope and courage and community are stronger than fear and loneliness and death. And yet I am so very aware, as my colleague, the Reverend Lynn Ungar, suggests, that this doesn't make it easier or less painful. She reflects beautifully and honestly in her poem that I shared this morning, asking us, and how do you live? With grief, with fear, with laughter, with boredom, with glee, with contentment, with fury, with hope, with the firm conviction that no thing cancels any other thing out. Death does not cancel life. Grief does not cancel joy. Fear does not cancel conviction, nor any of those statements in reverse. These feelings, these ways of being in the world swirl within us and around us in our homes and in our lives. They exist in paradox, in tension. They are wrestling like Jacob and the angel. And many of us are getting hurt from this struggle. So just as this congregation and our religious tradition believe that the long arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, towards peace, towards love and wholeness, that doesn't mean that we are also in the face of hell, in the face of our worst fears, that we may lose someone we love, that from this crisis our children will inherit a world much different than the one we hoped they would be given. Our progressive liberal faith tradition does not erase the very real anticipation of grief and loss that may be sitting with us of all Sundays this Easter morning. So I say it is a virtue, a spiritual practice, something worthy of practice, that we acknowledge our fears, that we give ourselves permission to preemptively grieve, to feel our own loss that comes from both small and large things. And truly, what is large and what is small in this time defies our laws of physics and reason. I've spoken to many of you about your children and you grieving for their loss of closure with this school year, with their teachers and friends, the grief you have for a lack of proper goodbyes and for space for a better transition. I've spoken to many of you about your grief of being separated from loved ones who are either much younger than you or much older, and feeling so aware of the preciousness of time that is passing with every breath. And of course, there is loss that comes from the death of our loved ones, those who we know very well, and those who we feel like we have known forever, but have never met, perhaps. John Prine, for example, or Jim Pruitt, and their deaths come to mind as having a major impact on some of you in the past couple weeks. And then there are the deaths or the declining health of people for natural reasons that we cannot be with during this time. And that weighs so heavily on me and many of you, I know. It matters. It matters that we acknowledge our grief and our constant state of vigilance as we prepare, anticipate, and ready our hearts for what is to come. For we do not know what is to come. We do not know what's coming. Personally, I have been living in a state of exhaustion this past month. Pam reminded me that this is the 1 month anniversary for us, or for me and her at least. And I'm not burning the midnight oil or getting a lack of sleep. I'm doing okay. I'm even cooking more and working in my garden and playing with Holly. But yet at the same time, I'm so tired. I'm so weary. My partner, Hattie, brilliant as always, suggested it might be all the stress and grief going on right now in the world. Well, of course, duh. But also, like, personally, I haven't had many huge, close disappointments yet. I'm pretty lucky so far, besides the basketball hoops at Donner Park being taken down. But what's true? What's true is that the anticipation of grief and loss, or the anticipation of trauma, or the elongated, continuous state of affairs we are now facing can be really hard, even if it is not happening to an individual personally. It can be like secondhand trauma, like smoking, or secondhand grief. It can still have an effect on us. And I expect it may be having an effect on us as individuals, as families, and as a community more than we'd like to admit. So by acknowledging our grief, our sense of loss, or our anticipation of these things to come, we release some of that energy back into the universe. Through acknowledgement of our pain, we release energy into the universe. It's no longer stored, trapped within our bodies, within our hearts. It's shared instead by a community, a city, a nation, a world. And because of this, our loneliness may decrease, our hopelessness may lighten, and our dread for what is to come may weigh less on us. And another thing happens when we acknowledge the grief we face or fear facing. We are given a better view of our journey in life, of our work in the world, of the preciousness of life and the blessing of community, of choosing to be in community. We are given an opportunity as we become more in touch with our grief and our sense of loss, to hold ourselves and one another, to be held by one another and something beyond our imagination. Call it love, or call it mystery, or the spirit of life, or God, or goddess. Call it what you will. Call it our virtual UUCCI community, our hope for the future, our courage to get there together. Call it what you must, and feel held in that love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in that love. That love. This love that holds us is not only our hope that this too shall pass, but our fear that perhaps it will never pass. The love that holds us in our strength and offers us permission still to weep, to crumple, to ask for help. This love that holds us, holds all of us. This community brings all of our fears and our worries, all of our excitements and our hopes for the future. That love is what is with us this Easter Sunday. Even as our grief is with us too, they do not cancel each other out. They are both holding us. They are both with us. And we, potters at the wheel of life, are learning, perhaps quickly, the delicate art of shaping the life we are given in this unbelievably trying time in human history. Reverend Ungar invites us to make our hearts a bowl that is large enough to hold it all. Imagine that you are the potter. Stretch the clay, cherish the turning wheel, accept that the bowl is never going to be done. But that's okay. It's okay that the bowl is never done, never perfect. It can still hold water. It can still hold love. It can still hold us, even as we are filled with both hope and grief. This world, this spring, this Easter is filled with both beauty and brokenness. And we are a community that seeks to lift up, to celebrate the beauty of the earth. It is who we are. It is in our DNA and in each of our bowls from which we drink and find our way in life. And we are also aware, especially in these times, how fragile our world is, how vulnerable humans and animals and all of life can become in just the blink of an eye, in a matter of weeks. Perhaps another world is possible. Perhaps we will emerge from this pandemic in new and miraculous ways. Perhaps when we return together in person, we will bring with us only what we need, only the things that serve our collective need, our collective longings in this world. We will explore what that world might look like next week. But today, we rest for a moment near the apex of a mountain of emotions. We rest for a moment along a marathon that feels like it has been going on forever and has just begun. May this Easter bring us to a reflective space where we recognize the totality of emotions that resides within us, within this common bowl, our chalice, which gives us light and meaning each week. I give thanks, even though I am anxious at times and anticipating what is to come. I still give thanks, for we are in this together, all of us. And with that knowledge, I promise to face whatever is before us with love and courage. That is my promise to you. May we be so bold to promise that to one another. May it be so, and amen.